10 people who disappeared under strange circumstances. Number 10. The heiress lost in broad daylight. Dorothy Arnold was a young and wealthy New York socialite who had her whole future ahead of her. On the morning of December 12, 1910, she left her home on Fifth Avenue to go shopping. She was last seen by a friend in a bookstore at around 2 p.m. After that casual conversation, Dorothy Arnold vanished without a trace on one of the busiest streets in the world. Her family, fearing a social scandal, waited weeks to report her disappearance to the police, precious time that complicated any chance of finding her. Despite a massive investigation that spread across the country and even to Europe, and the offer of enormous rewards by her wealthy father, not a single solid clue about her whereabouts was ever found. Theories ranged from a kidnapping for ransom that went wrong, to the possibility that she ran away to live a new life, far from the pressures of her family. Hospitals and morgues were searched, and hundreds of false leads were followed, but it was as if Dorothy had evaporated into thin air. Her case became a Manhattan urban legend, a chilling reminder that neither wealth nor status can protect someone from the inexplicable. Number 9. The children the fire didn't claim. On Christmas Eve of 1945, the Sauter family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia was consumed by a devastating fire. George and Jenny Sauter managed to escape with 4 of their 9 children, but the other 5 were trapped inside. Tragically, when the fire was extinguished, not the slightest trace of human remains was found in the ashes, something that forensic experts deemed virtually impossible. The fire chief suggested that the blaze had been so intense that it had completely cremated the bodies, an explanation the Sauters never accepted. What followed was a lifetime of searching and unanswered questions. The Sauters discovered that their phone lines had been cut, and that their ladder, which was always kept leaning against the house, had mysteriously disappeared on the night of the fire. Over the years, they received strange clues, such as a photograph sent in the 1960s that supposedly showed one of their missing sons as a young man. Convinced their children had been abducted, the Sauters erected a billboard with the children's photos, which remained there for decades as a somber monument to one of the most heartbreaking and bizarre disappearances in American history. Number 8. The inventor who vanished from a train. Louis Le Prince is considered by many historians to be the true father of cinema. In 1888, years before the Lumiere brothers and Thomas Edison, Le Prince filmed the first successful moving pictures. He was on the cusp of fame and fortune, preparing for a public demonstration of his revolutionary camera in New York. In September 1890, after visiting his brother in Dijon, France, he boarded a train bound for Paris. He was last seen by his brother getting on the train, but when the train arrived at its destination, Le Prince was not on board. The police searched every inch of the train and the tracks between Dijon and Paris, but they found nothing. Neither Le Prince nor his luggage, which contained his valuable plans and prototypes, were ever found. The windows of his compartment were closed and locked from the inside. Did he jump from the train? Was he murdered by a rival jealous of his invention who wanted to steal his technology? Le Prince's disappearance allowed others like Edison to take credit for the invention of cinema, leaving the legacy of this pioneer lost to time, like a ghost in the history of technology. Number 7. The Prime Minister who was swallowed by the sea. Harold Holt, the 17th Prime Minister of Australia, was an avid swimmer and lover of the ocean. On December 17, 1967, during a day off, he decided to go for a swim at Cheviot Beach, a place known for its dangerous currents and surf. Despite the warnings of his companions, Holt waded into the water and began to swim. Within minutes, his friends saw him being swept away by a strong current until he disappeared from their sight beneath the waves. What followed was one of the largest search and rescue operations in Australian history. Boats, helicopters, Navy divers, and hundreds of volunteers combed the area for days, but his body was never recovered. The absence of a body gave rise to a whirlwind of conspiracy theories. Some claimed he had faked his own death to run off with a mistress, while other, more outlandish theories suggested he was abducted by a Chinese submarine. Despite the speculation, the most likely explanation is that he simply drowned, but his disappearance without a trace remains a shocking event and a national mystery in Australia. Number 6. The Keepers of the Ghostly Lighthouse. In December 1900, a supply ship heading to the lighthouse on the remote Flannan Isles off the coast of Scotland noticed something strange. The lighthouse beacon was out. Upon arriving at the island, the ship's captain found the lighthouse door closed and a deathly silence. Inside, everything seemed to be in order. There was a half-eaten meal on the table, an overturned chair, and the coats of the three keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur, were hanging up. However, the men were nowhere to be found. The lighthouse logbook contained cryptic and alarming entries. One, written by Marshall, spoke of a terrible storm, the likes of which he had never seen, even though weather records for the area showed no such event. The final entry, dated days before the discovery, simply read, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." The bodies of the three men were never found. Theories range from a rogue wave that swept them out to sea to an altercation among them that ended in tragedy. The mystery of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keeper is a maritime tale that has baffled investigators for over a century. Number 5. The pioneer who was lost in the sky. Amelia Earhart was one of the most celebrated figures of her time, a daring aviator who broke barriers and records. In 1937, she embarked on her most ambitious challenge yet, to become the first woman to fly around the world. On July 2nd, during one of the most perilous legs of the journey, Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, took off from Lae, New Guinea, bound for the tiny Howland Island, a spot lost in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. Despite radio exchanges, they never reached their destination. In her final transmissions, Earhart reported that they were flying through cloudy skies and were having trouble locating the island. Then, after one last garbled message, there was silence. The most expensive and extensive search operation in U.S. naval history up to that point was launched, covering over 250,000 square miles of ocean, but not a single trace of the plane or its occupants was found. Decades later, their fate remains a subject of intense debate, with theories ranging from a simple crash and sinking to the idea that they were captured by the Japanese or survived as castaways on a deserted island. Number 4. The thief who jumped into legend. On November 24, 1971, a calm, well-dressed man who identified himself as Dan D.B. Cooper boarded a flight from Portland to Seattle. Once in the air, he passed a note to a flight attendant informing her that he had a bomb in his briefcase and demanding $200,000 and 4 parachutes. After receiving the money and parachutes in Seattle, Cooper ordered the pilot to take off again, this time heading for Mexico City. Somewhere over the rugged and forested terrain of southwestern Washington state, Cooper did the unthinkable. He jumped from the rear door of the plane in the dead of night and in the middle of a storm. Despite one of the longest and most exhaustive manhunts in FBI history, D.B. Cooper was never found. Neither his body, his parachute, nor the briefcase with the money was located. The only tangible clue appeared in 1980 when a young boy found a bundle of decaying $20 bills whose serial numbers matched the ransom money. The rest of the loot and the man known as D.B. Cooper vanished into the night, creating the only unsolved case of air piracy in United States history and becoming an icon of American folklore. Number 3. The judge who went to dinner and never returned. Joseph Force Crater was a respected New York State Supreme Court justice. On August 6, 1930, after having dinner with friends at a Manhattan restaurant, he said his goodbyes, got into a taxi, and headed west on 45th Street. That was the last time anyone ever saw him. His disappearance was made even stranger by the fact that his wife did not report him missing for 10 days, assuming he was on a business trip. When the investigation was finally launched, a web of political corruption and connections to the underworld was uncovered. The judge had withdrawn large sums of money from his bank accounts and had destroyed several documents in his office shortly before he disappeared. Did he flee to escape his troubles and his mob connections, which were putting him in danger? Or was he murdered for knowing too much about the corruption scandals plaguing the city? Despite thousands of leads being investigated and his becoming the most missingest man in New York, Judge Crater's case was never solved. His name led to the popular expression, to pull a crater, meaning to disappear without a trace. Number 2. The ghost crew of the Mary Celeste. The case of the Mary Celeste is perhaps the most famous maritime mystery of all time. In December 1872, This merchant brigantine was found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean, sailing aimlessly but in perfectly seaworthy condition. The ship that found her, the Desgracia, sent a boarding party that discovered a completely deserted vessel. There were no signs of a struggle, the cargo of industrial alcohol was untouched, and the crew's personal belongings remained in their quarters. The last entry in the logbook was from 10 days prior and indicated nothing out of the ordinary. What was most baffling was the absence of the captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and the 7 crewmen. The ship's only lifeboat was missing, suggesting that the crew had abandoned the ship in an orderly fashion. But why? The theories are countless. A mutiny, a pirate attack, a sea monster, or even madness brought on by fumes from the alcohol cargo. However, none of these theories explain why they would abandon a perfectly sound ship to face the open ocean in a small boat. The fate of the 10 souls aboard the Mary Celeste remains an unanswered question, a ghost ship sailing through history. Number 1. The pilot who described his captor before disappearing. On October 21, 1978, young pilot Frederick Valentich was flying his Cessna light aircraft over the Bass Strait in Australia. During his flight, he made radio contact with Melbourne Air Traffic Control to report something deeply strange. An unknown aircraft was following him. In a chilling 6-minute transmission, Valentich described the object as elongated, shiny, and metallic, with a green light moving at incredible speeds. He claimed the object was orbiting above him and that it was unlike any aircraft he knew. The most disturbing part of the recording is when Valentich reports that his own engine is failing. His last words transmitted to air traffic control were, "That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft." These words were followed by a harsh, metallic scraping sound lasting 17 seconds before the transmission abruptly cut off. Neither Valentich nor his plane was ever found. Despite official explanations suggesting he may have become disoriented, the detailed and terrified description of an unidentified flying object just before he vanished makes the case of Frederick Valentich the strangest and most unsettling disappearance of all, a mystery that lies on the boundary between the known and the inexplicable.
Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.